Welcome back to another episode of
We Are
Geek. I am Josiah Swanson.
And I'm Ben Hendrian.
And for the first time in WeRGeek history, we are going to be bringing you a whole new type of video called the Rant video.
The Rant. You all know what a rant is, and you've never heard us rant before. Well, you probably heard us kind of mini rant.
A little bit, like just, spurts every once in a while.
A little bit, but today we're going to be ranting about an issue that needs to be brought to light, I think.
Because it really annoys us a lot.
It annoys the out of me. I don't know. Being writers, I think that's one of the reasons it annoys us so much. Mm-hmm. But other people get annoyed by it too. People that don't write.
That's
so
true.
There you go.
So with that being said,
what are we talking about today?
We're going to be talking about villains.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes a good villain.
Mm-hmm.
And can villains be human and vulnerable?
Sure.
Or does that make them weak? So let's talk about that.
Let's talk about this, people. So stay tuned.
Alright, so here we are, and we are going to rant.
Be warned, I have a cold, so I'm kind of already antsy and,
And be warned, I don't have a cold. So let's get into it. So, villains. There's been a lot of complaining going on about Kylo Ren.
We're going to use him as a
villain.
major example in this video.
He's the reason why we're doing this video, actually, is because in light of everything that's going on with Star Wars and the talking about Star Wars and Kylo Ren and how he's not a good villain, how he's weak and a whiny baby and all that other stuff, we're going to be talking about villains in general and what makes a good villain, and is it wrong to have a villain that's got more vulnerability, who can be more human than your typical villain. So, with that being said, Kylo Ren. I know this is more passionate for you than for me, so I'm just going to let you go because, yeah.
So, with Kylo Ren, a lot of people have been saying that he is just a crybaby, a wuss, whatever you want to call him, because various reasons. One... Okay, we probably should say there's kind of going to be spoilers in this video for The Force Awakens.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
there's going to be spoilers.
There's a possibility of spoilers if I'm going too much.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've had more than 3 or 4 people say that Kylo Ren looks really cool and is really cool until his mask comes off in The Force Awakens. And then after his mask comes off, it's like, what?
He's a human? Huh? He's normal looking?
Yeah, and
what?
I've made a point so many times. In fact, I made a post on Geeks and Gamers on Friday, basically spelling out my thoughts about Kylo Ren. What people see is they see just a normal dude, and when they want to see a villain, they just want to see either a good-looking guy, someone who's battle-scarred, something like that. And what they need to realize is that's just material. That doesn't make a villain. Mm-hmm. What makes a villain is true struggle, because real people, and that's what characters are based off of, real people have struggles. Fake people do not have struggles. You want to base a character off of real people so you can relate to that character and you can feel their struggle yourself. Kylo Ren is a very realistic character in the way that he has done something wrong, and he's done a lot of stuff wrong. And he's struggling knowing that he has done stuff wrong. And that shows vulnerability right there. I don't know. I'm just getting all my thoughts.
Yeah. So, just remember that we're also writers, and so this is like really passionate for us because, we strive to write good characters and stuff, and that goes for both the heroes and villains. Because villains also have to be interesting and have to move the story along just as much as the heroes do. So, Kylo Ren obviously moves the story along a lot, and not only that, but he is so interwoven with the storylines of Rey and Finn, and because of that, you can't just have a guy walking around who doesn't have any sort of struggle or emotions or anything like that. You can't just have him walking around doing killing people left and right and stuff.
I mean, because if that was the case, then it would just be like, oh, he's just another one of those two-dimensional villains that has no story. And why would
you want to have another two-dimensional villain? I mean, isn't it more interesting to have him have struggles? And even like the struggles don't make him a weak villain. That's clearly obvious in all of the super cool stuff that he does throughout the whole movie. He stops laser bolts in midair. That's the first time we've ever seen that in a Star Wars movie.
That's true.
And he can stop people from swinging a lightsaber in midair or whatever. He can read minds. We've seen him do more than any other Sith or Jedi previously in any Star Wars movie.
Yeah, and he's extremely powerful in that way. And one area where I can see some people being right, it just depends on if they look at it this way, is that he's mentally weak, which is true. He is mentally struggling, just like anybody would be mentally struggling, because he's struggling between good and between evil. Yeah. And he's caught in the middle of that, and he doesn't know what's right and he doesn't know what's wrong. He thinks that he's trying to stay away from good because he knows that it's basically that that's more where he's headed towards, I think, is the good side, because he's struggling so much with it. And he is trying to fight and fight and fight against what's good to go and, and do what's evil. And that shows just how much struggle is in that character is realistic for people today. You could, because of consciousness, basically, you could want to do something bad, and you do that, and that basically you're just falling further and further into that pit. Or you can struggle with it and, try to gain back, basically morality.
Exactly.
Yep. And his character is struggling in that same way.
Mm-hmm. And, when Ben and I were talking about this the other day, pretty much any fantasy / sci-fi film, especially when it's like high fantasy and stuff like that, is going to have your major villain who is driving the whole conflict of the whole series or movie or whatever, and then you're going to have the secondary villain who's playing a sort of a smaller role, but they're typically the one that's struggling between doing what's right and what's wrong, and is the one that's interacting more intimately with the heroes and stuff. The secondary villain, yep. So, you have Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens, you have Darth Vader in the original trilogy, who, I've never heard anyone complaining that he's a weak villain.
No, but you want to know an interesting thing is another area of Kylo Ren's vulnerability is he's never had a father figure in his life. Mm-hmm. And that's why he's so insistent on Darth Vader and his grandfather's presence, basically. That's why he looks up to him so much, and that's why he wants to become evil, because he doesn't like that. And Snoke has twisted his mind, basically making him think that, Darth Vader turning good was the epitome of just the worst thing in the world, and so he wants to go down the dark path that Vader was once on. But as we all know, Vader was redeemed as a character, which was really neat and really cool, and that was his story coming full circle. Exactly. I have a feeling we're going to get a similar story like that with Kylo Ren, which will be really neat to see.
Yeah, yep. And so, that's just how most fantasy films go in the first place. And I've never heard anyone complaining about the secondary villain being a weak villain or anything. Loki in the Marvel movies, the MCU and stuff, I know that it's really debatable about people, but he's an interesting character who has struggles and flaws.
He's the same type of character.
Yeah, and he's but at the same time, he's trying to be a brother to Thor and stuff, and he's struggling with all that, and where he fits in with the Asgardians and stuff. And then you have like Gollum in Lord of the Rings, who's kind of the secondary villain, but just because he's struggling between the power of the ring and trying to help Frodo and Sam and stuff, that doesn't make him a weak villain either, No. And so pretty much any fantasy film, you're going to find the same sort of setup.
And I think what I personally think makes a good villain is a villain that thinks they're the hero of their own story.
Well, yeah,
that
totally.
Is always going to be the best type of villain. Someone that thinks what they're doing is right, but is wrong at the same
Yep.
time. So you know who's the good guy and you know who's the bad guy, but they still think that they're a hero of their own story.
Even like Hitler, he thought he was doing the right thing.
He did.
Even though, obviously he was doing the wrong thing and was doing completely horrendous things, he thought he was doing the right thing. And so if Hitler could think that, pretty much any other villain is going to think that they're doing the right thing as well. So
Exactly. And in many ways, the First Order, the Empire, in Star Wars has been compared to the Nazis because they are very similar to the Nazi regime. So that's all interesting in and of itself. But I think that with Anakin or with Kylo Ren or something like that, they're both extremely mentally tormented characters. They're both very real characters. Anakin, yes, he can get a little whiny at times, but he still is a real character. He's still got real struggles and stuff. Like when his mom dies in Attack of the Clones, that was actually, I mean, I'm one to totally bash Hayden Christensen's acting, but that was some of his best acting right there. When his mom's dead and he, is just getting so angry about it, and he's struggling with the dark side, whereas Kylo Ren's struggling with the light side. That's also a cool thing, as they're kind of flip-flopped, but they're both similar characters in that way. Exactly.
So yeah, so Kylo Ren is definitely, I just don't even see how people can think that he's a weak villain. Just because you have a villain who's acting, human stuff does not make them weak at all. And if you want to just stick with the villains that are 2D and stuff, then I guess that's cool. But if you want a movie that's going to have more of an interesting plot line and more of a developed storyline for the heroes, you're going to need a more developed storyline of your villain as well.
Because having a underdeveloped villain will cause your heroes to, in the end, be underdeveloped.
Exactly.
Because their stories intertwine so much when you're writing a story. The villain and the hero, they kind of play off of each other the entire time. So if you don't have a good villain, you won't have a very good hero. If you don't have a good hero, you won't have a very good villain. It's just it's all in the way it's written, and it's all, it's either weak or strong.
Exactly. Yep. So, that's our thoughts on this. Please let us know in the comments below what you think as well. Even though we might seem like we're super mad about this and stuff, we do appreciate everyone's opinions and their views and stuff. And we just think that people need to understand how a well-developed character is written and stuff in a movie or a book or whatever. And how they work. So, not saying we're like amazing writers or anything, but we are writers.
By far, we're not. I'm not an amazing writer at all. But when it comes to villains, I think we both have, a little bit of knowledge about villains and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think everybody else, I'm sure you guys have different areas of knowledge that we don't.
Exactly. Yep.
So we'd like to hear your thoughts on the villains and everything else.
And no matter what, no matter if you like 2D villains or 3D villains,
no matter what,
all geeks win.
All geeks win, people. All geeks win.
See you next week.